Welcome to Liner Notes. My name is David Bixler. Liner Notes begins season number 6 with saxophonist and educator Steve Wilson. In this episode of Liner Notes, Steve highlights his new quartet, the Analog Band, as well as an upcoming commissioning project with Billy Childs featuring Steve with Wind Symphony. These are two of the myriad projects that he juggles as one of today's most in-demand leaders and sidemen. Steve Wilson, welcome to Liner Notes. Good afternoon.
Great to be with you, Vix.
Good to see you again, man. I was looking at your calendar. Looked like you were just on a tour with Maria Schneider. And back with that, I know she had like a big, was it 25 years, 30-year anniversary of the band? Or?
Yeah, 30 years, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Time flies, man. Is there a new recording with that? There was Data Lords. That was maybe a year ago or 2 years ago now?
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago. And of course, some of the dates in this tour were COVID dates. I mean, dates that were booked for 2019 or 2020. So we're still making up for lost, gigs.
Okay.
So, yeah. But Data Lords was released before COVID. And, but so we can still tour with, most of that repertoire. But she's actually missing in some of the older material as well.
With her band, your plate's full. You got a lot of stuff coming up, and really want to touch on this commission. That sounds pretty exciting. But first, you're at Birdland coming up with the Analog Band. Corcoran Holt and Willie Jones III. I understand this was going to be recorded for a live recording, and now that's been put on hold. But maybe tell me about this band and the repertoire and what's going to be going on, for listeners that might be checking this out.
Yeah, well, I just give you some history into the project. A few years ago, I'm thinking it was maybe 5 years ago already. Of course, the COVID has just shifted time, so I can't remember the timelines anymore. But JMI, which is a boutique record company, they're kind of doing audiophile kind of stuff. So they were just only doing LP, no digital recording or products of any kind. So the owner of the label, Jay Cohen, and the producer, Steve Mandel, who does a lot of work with The Roots, with them live and also on the Tonight Show, they came to me with this idea of taking a group into the studio. They would give me a collection of songs that they proposed. They weren't even well-known songs. I think it was a friend of theirs who was doing some singer-songwriter type stuff. And they said, you can arrange these songs any way you want, put together a band. We'll talk about a band, and we'll go in the studio and do it completely analog. And I went, wait a minute, you mean like to tape? And they said, yep, it's to tape, and it'll be analog mixing and mastering. I went, what? Because as we know, that's very expensive. No one who does that these days.
Right.
And they said, yeah, well, this is a concept we've been doing. They had a small catalog of other artists who had done these kind of things. And I said, sure. And so we put the band together. And, I just went and rearranged some of the tunes, wrote one or two things for it, and went in the studio. And kind of like the old school that they did in the 70s, they let us workshop the tunes in the studio, rehearse it in the studio. And then when we're ready to do a track, they said, okay, let's roll. And so that's the way we did the entire record. I kind of just wrote some sketches of charts, nothing elaborate. I had to rewrite a couple of things, but, a lot of the shaping took place right there in the studio. They would just let us rehearse it for about a half hour, an hour. Then we're ready to roll. They said, okay, let's do one. And it was a really cool experience, man, because who gets to do that these days? We're always trying to prepare everything before we go in because of studio time and money. But they said, no, take your time. We're cool. And so we went in for 2 days and just had a great time. And it was a ball.
2 questions. How long did it take you?
Well, we did the whole thing in 2 days.
Okay.
And now, here's the thing. I'll back up a little bit. The original concept was to do it as a cordless trio. And I thought, okay, well, so as I was sort of working with the material, I was thinking, well, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'll give it a shot. So I wrote sketches for some kind of arrangements. And then Steve Mandel said, well, look, we'd like to bring in Ray Angry to maybe do some coloring on keyboards, for a couple of things. I'm like, okay, great. So Ray showed up on the first day. We actually had a sort of a pre-record day. They wanted us to come in, just kind of get sounds on the first day, try a couple of things, see if they work, and then come in the next day to do the actual recording. So we were all there in the pre-record day, and then Ray came in. As soon as he started playing, I went, oh, wait a minute. I said, no. He's got to be in the whole date, man. This guy's incredible. And so that night I rewrote all of the charts because he has such an amazing harmonic palette. I said, man, he's going to make the date really special. And his whole sense of groove and all of that, So we went in the next 2 days, man, and just had a great time. And that's what it did, and it was beautiful.
That's great. My other question is, where's the analog studio, if you're allowed to disclose this?
Yeah, what was the name of the studio? River something, which is in Midtown, I think on 36th Street between 6th and 5th Avenue. I forget the name of the studio at the moment. But I honestly didn't know that there were any studios that were still doing this.
Right.
I mean, they had, digital gear, but they were all set up to do the tape. And I going and seeing this because the last recording I'd done like that was maybe 1999 or 98. Even then, it was a rarity, But yeah, so they said, no, we're not doing digital anything. I said, what about releasing the product? We're going to put it on, iTunes, whatever. Like, no digital anything. So the thing with this project, with the next project, the live one, we're talking about at least having it released on digital format because we need to promote the record. Like, it's great to know they'll be available on LPs, and it's great that LPs have come back, but we can't really make a substantial promotion with it, being available to such a small audience. So they've agreed to make it available in digital format at least.
And that's great. Was that the first vinyl you've done?
Strictly vinyl, yeah. I think maybe I'm going back to my first recording with Criss Cross. No, that was all CD. My very first recording as a leader. But some of the stuff I'd done before that, like with Out of the Blue, and maybe Ralph Peterson, I think that was when the crossover was happening, from LP to CDs.
Right. Okay, and then so this is the group that's going to be at Birdland with you then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I should mention also the original group had Ben Williams on bass, but then Ben got very busy on his own. Of course, he's got his own projects going now, and he's living in LA. So Corcoran Holt has become a part of the group now.
You said they presented you with the material and it was all singer-songwriter type material. Were you a little suspect at first, and did you have to, work through it? Obviously, I mean, like, how much did you have to massage it?
That's a great question, man, because, when they sent it to me, I thought, okay, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do. And I remember calling Steve. He said, man, no limits. Do whatever you want. These are simple tunes, so just take whatever liberties you want with that. So this was a challenge because, I thought, okay, well, my thought process is usually, how do I stay true to the composer, even with reshaping something? But so it was really taking the simplest material and, okay, what kind of grooved up? Because this was not jazz-oriented stuff at all. So they just gave me complete freedom with it. So it was a real challenge. But I thought, you know what, I'll shape it as I hear it. We'll try it and we'll see what works. And and of course, yeah, it proved to be a good template. What I did was basically just a template. But we did further shaping in the studio because, when you put everybody together, then things come out, that I couldn't even envision. And I thought, oh, okay, so we tried different grooves and, So the idea was, what it really became in the studio was not so much to think of it as a jazz record. And so once that became self-evident as we're putting together. Then it was actually, then the freedom came in because, it took it out of a box, even the box that I had put myself in. And given, particularly with Ray's abilities, because Ray's not strictly a jazz musician. I mean, most of his work is in R&B, gospel, but he's schooled in classical. But one of our first conversations was about Mulgrew Miller, because Mulgrew's a big inspiration to him. So he's got this huge palette that he draws from. And as a matter of fact, I think he just premiered something with a symphony in Lexington. He wrote a concerto or something. So this guy's got, a wide range. And yeah, exactly. So with Willie Jones there and Corcoran also has a wide range. It just kind of became this thing, whatever it is. So if you want to call it soul jazz, that's fine. I'm perfectly good with that because that's a genre that I love. And so, yeah, it just kind of freed it up from this box that I had sort of put myself into once we started playing it in the studio.
All right. So singer-songwriter material for the first record. So the one that is coming up, what's the material? Are you writing or is it more from the same songwriters?
No, I think I'll be writing more. We've also added, for a live performance, we've added some other tunes. So we added from Les McCann and Eddie Harris' Swiss Movement, there's a tune called Kathleen's Theme. So we've added that. We've put a little arrangement of that together. There's another tune by Cedar Walton called Jacob's Ladder, which he did a couple of recordings of, I think with the larger ensemble, with the smaller ensemble. So we've added that. But I'm going to actually try to write more material. And there's a couple of older R&B tunes that I'd like to arrange for the band, particularly with Ray playing organ, because he plays an incredible B3. There's a tune called Misdemeanor by a group called the Silvers from way back in the day, in the early 70s, which could be kind of a nice soul jazz vibe. So yeah, and I want to write something that's really for the band. And now that, we've got the personnel and the chemistry that to write it for this particular group.
That's great. I look forward to hearing that, especially live. In addition to this quartet, you also have 3 duos that you're playing in. One with pianist Bruce Barth, another with pianist Billy Childs, which we'll come to later, and then also with percussionist Louis Nash, which you've been doing for quite some time now. And I understand you have a new recording coming out, and this is from a live jazz festival. It was Umbria.
Yeah, we've played at Umbria a few times, and we're actually going back again this year, the Umbria Winterfest in Oviedo. But the last time we played there was a few years ago. They recorded it live, and they came to us a little later. I think Red Records was interested. So we've been working with them and worked out a deal, and I think we did 3 concerts there. So we worked out a set list from the 3 concerts that they're going to put out. And it's so great on a few levels. One, playing with Louis Nash in any context, as you know, it's magic. And I met Louis before I moved to New York. I heard him when he was playing with Branford Marsalis' quartet. And so when I first heard him, I thought, man, one of these days I've got to play with this guy. I mean, because I'm a frustrated drummer. And he plays drums the way I want to play him, So, I mean, among other drummers, but I just thought, man, this is so great. And he actually ended up playing on my second recording for Crisscross, which was 1992 or 93. And we've had worked together in different recording sessions and bands since then. But Laura put the duo together, over 15 years ago. And we didn't rehearse. We just got together. We discussed some repertoire we could do. And from the very first hit, it was just magic. But Louis is so musical. you don't miss anything when he. I mean, Lewis is probably one of the few drummers. He could probably play an entire concert with just solo drum set, and people would love it because he's just so melodical, so thematic, so musical dynamics, and it's just incredible. So it's really like a full ensemble playing with him. So we've evolved our repertoire over the years, and so this recording reflects that chemistry.
That's cool. And you said that Laura put that together. Was it something that you had thought about and that you wanted to make happen, or did she just decide this is what you need to do?
Well, I honestly, I hadn't thought about it with Lewis. I had done duo many, many, many years ago with Billy Drummond because, Billy and I are from the same area. And I used, when we were teenagers, I used to drive up to his house and play duos with him, and we'd listen to records because he taught me so much about music and, just the whole lineage and drummers particularly. And then later on, some years later, after I moved to New York, I'd done some duo stuff with Leon Parker, who I work with quite a bit. And we did a duo concert at the Montreal Jazz Festival many years ago. That was probably about 20 years ago. And having played with Ralph Peterson, we didn't do any dedicated duo work, but sometimes we work it into his sets. So, I had been looking to do some kind of duo project with the drummer at some point. And then Laura she had a concert series she was producing with duos down in Soho. And she says, hey, look, I think about who you want to play duo with. And I think she said the same thing to Lewis. And then she called me back and said, hey, how would you feel about doing this with Lewis Nash? I went, are you kidding? That's a no-brainer, of course.
Yeah.
I said, even if it's a one-off, I'm down, count me in, sign me up. And man, it just, from the very first downbeat, it became a thing, like, wow, I don't have to think about anything. Everything is instinctual. And we were just like minds, so it just took off right from the very beginning.
That's super hip. As I mentioned, the third duo that you participate in is with the great Billy Childs. Maybe speak a little bit about the history of that duo, and then, I want to tell everyone you have this really exciting project coming up where you're commissioning him to write a piece for yourself and Wind Symphony, and want to jump into that. But maybe first a little bit of the introduction about your relationship with this master musician.
Well, man, I'm very, very blessed to have befriended Billy over the years. And, of course, I've been a fan of his, was a fan of his for many, many years, like most of us. I actually met him in Japan at the Mount Fuji Jazz Festival, 1986, my first trip to Japan. And he and Mulgrew Miller were best friends. So when I would travel with Mulgrew, particularly playing out in L.A., Billy would usually come out, and that's where we got to know each other a bit. And then got to play with him and his music in a couple of his groups, his quartet, and then subbing in his chamber jazz ensemble. I would usually sub for Bob Shepard, which is a tall order because we know Bob is a master woodwind player, and Billy writes some very challenging music. And then we've been able to do a couple of duo projects. I think it hasn't been that often we've done it. We did something out in, was it Corvallis, Oregon, some years ago. But playing with Billy, man, it's incredible because, he's so deeply versed in the classical genre as well as jazz, but also in pop. And few folks may know this, but he's deep into the British progressive rock stuff that, was around the 60s and 70s. I mean, he's like an encyclopedia of music. And he's hit me to a lot of stuff. But playing with him literally is like playing with an orchestra, because he studied orchestration and he knows the entire lineage, intimately. He can talk in great detail about any classical composer and the orchestration and methods and all of that. So his playing is not just from a jazz perspective, but it's from the rich classical tradition, and his harmonic palette is so wide. And he'll play stuff that you can't even put names to these chords. So it's just total freedom, melodic freedom when you're playing with him, because he'll hear anything you do and add this other stuff to it. And you're like, oh my God, I just can hear all of these possibilities. So playing with him, man, is just, even in any context, but especially in duo. Again, it doesn't reduce it; it opens up possibilities. The same way that it does with Lewis in other ways, but with Childs, it's just so big with the harmony and melodic concepts, and rhythm. And because his rhythm stuff is like incredible. He's got some incredible rhythmic concepts. But playing his music particularly, he's such an incredible composer, and it's just so informative. I learn a lot from him every time I play, just the possibilities and the concepts of composing, how to think about composition, even in a small group context. He helps you to hear and see all the possibilities, how you can stretch a form, how you can make so much of a smaller form, how you could think in a larger sound, a concept or context. It's really amazing. So every time I come away with so much from him.
Tell me how this piece for Wind Symphony came about. What inspired this?
Well, this has been one of my bucket list projects for many years, and like most of us who started playing music in the 70s or thereafter, coming through school music programs, you do symphonic wind band, and that's a genre that I actually loved all through my middle school, high school, and my first couple of years of college. I played in symphonic wind band. I played oboe my last 2 years of high school. Yeah, because the oboist graduated, and my band director said, "Hey, we need an oboe player. You want to play oboe?" I said, "Yeah." And the real reason I wanted to play oboe was because it was closer to the soprano saxophone, and I didn't have a soprano. I thought, wow, I could kind of get close to that sound. But I ended up really loving the oboe and playing it in the symphonic wind band. So, and going to college and playing in the band, the symphonic wind band there, I just loved that repertoire, particularly the music of Percy Granger. We played a lot of that. And I thought one of these days I would love to do some kind of project with symphonic wind band. I just love that sound. The other bucket list project that I want to do at some point is with a brass ensemble. So a few years ago, when I thought of an idea of what I wanted to do in a larger context, I thought, man, knowing Billy's work with symphony, which I've been able to play with him also in some of his symphonic works, I thought, man, he would be the perfect guy to do this. And so I asked him, I said, Billy, this is an idea I've had. Would you want to do so? He said, yeah, of course. For you, of course. I thought, oh my God. So I took it to Laura. I said, look, I want to find a way to do this. I don't know where to begin in terms of how to fund this. It's not something I want to go to a record company and say, hey, would you record this? Because I know what the answer is going to be. Are you kidding? You know how much that's going to cost? So in talking with Billy, he's well-versed in the grant world and funding and commissions, because even now, he's probably got 10 commissions on his plate that he's completing for other projects, everything from string quartet to woodwind quintet to symphony to whatever. And he said, well, here's another way to think about it. And so we had a discussion with Laura, and now she's going out, and I think we have about 10 schools committed at this point, and some major universities, the University of Michigan, I think University of Illinois, a few of the Midwest schools, I think Westchester University in Pennsylvania, a few others. And so we're about the halfway point of getting this team of commissions. And the idea is to tour it in 2025. And all of these schools, we will play it there. They get the first right to perform it, and have the music. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. And so hopefully we'll get that done. Initially we're going to do it for 23-24, but Billy got really backed up with other projects. And of course the COVID thing kicked everything back a year or two. So the timing is very good. So I'm hoping to time it with a sabbatical from school and be able to practice it, because I know he's going to kick my behind with whatever he gives me. And I'll probably need to shed it for 6 months. But very excited about doing this.
Is it for alto, soprano, or both?
I think he'll do both. As a matter of fact, they're touring now a project, a symphonic work he did for the great Stephen Banks, who's a classical saxophonist, and I think he's maybe even has Stephen playing all three horns, I think tenor, soprano, and alto. But I told him, I said, just soprano and alto for me. Because that's all they play. I don't mess with the tenor and, the baritone. But yes, I think it'll be for both horns.
Are there any parameters? Will there be a rhythm section? I assume there'll be some kind of improvising.
Yeah, there'll be improvisation. There will be piano included. I think we're discussing rhythm section. The way that I conceived it was not with rhythm section, but we're in discussion about that. He hasn't started it yet, so I'm still going back and forth on that, because we also will tour this project with other things that we'll do in that concert, with a rhythm section. So I'm not sure that I want to include a rhythm section, but we'll see. I certainly don't want to place handcuffs on Billy. But the only other parameters I'd given him at this point that, I would really like to have, the different instruments featured at certain points. I'd like to hear some French horn, some bassoon, some English horn, things that we don't normally get a lot of. I'd like to have for them to have some spots to shine. So bass clarinet, I want to hear those sounds being brought out. And I know he can do it brilliantly.
That sounds like it's going to be very cool to listen to. Steve, one last thing before I let you go here. Education is a part of your life. You're active as a clinician and also head of jazz at City College and recently co-director of the Lavinia program. Maybe
Yes.
just talk about your involvement in education, what you're doing, and how you balance everything as with all your projects and the teaching.
Yeah. Well, as you well know, it's a challenging balance. It's a challenging thing to pull off. But no, I love teaching, love mentoring. And actually, the City College job was, to be quite honest, it was not something I ever had eyes to do, was to be a full-time faculty member. Like most of us, was teaching adjunct all over the place. And so City College had me as a guest artist about 12 years ago. And John Patitucci was just about to leave the program. So they asked me to apply for the full-time position. And I thought for sure that, well, okay, I'll apply, but I probably won't get it, because I know how many qualified educators there are around and just some incredible people. And so I ended up being one of the finalists and ended up with the job. And then two senior faculty members retired a few years after that. Scott Reeves, a great trombonist and arranger who retired just a few years ago. And Dan Carrillo, who was one of the senior faculty members who actually helped to start the program way back in the 70s. So I stepped into the director's slot, and it's been an incredible experience, particularly working with my colleagues. Mike Holliver was just an incredible educator, musician, composer, arranger, pianist. Ray Gallen, who we know from our days with Lionel Hampton, of course, great pianist and educator. And Suzanne Pitson, who was director of the vocal jazz program. So working with them, when you have great colleagues like that and great support from the administration, it really makes a difference. And as you know, you have to have that in a university setting to make anything happen. So, because it can be very challenging. So that's been great. And my other work with the Ravinia program, this is now my 5th year. And that program has been around for quite a while, which was started by David Baker and Rufus Reed, who's been with the program now for over 20 years. And Billy has been with the program, I think, for over 10. So they had a Jazz Fellows program, which is a high selective program. There's no audition. Everyone is handpicked. They choose 15 of the best young musicians that are great players and budding composers, and they bring them in. It's like an artist colony for a week. They all play together in different combinations, and at the end of the week, they do a concert of their compositions and arrangements. And it's such a beautiful experience because these relationships that form that week is just so beautiful and nurturing. And it's been great because there's no egos. Everyone's just giving each other and exchanging ideas. And it's just beautiful to watch this process. And so we're there as coaches and mentors. And the Bridges program, which is part 2 of that, was started a few years ago. and that's combining the jazz and classical genres. So it's a competition, and the winners, we bring in 3 winners, and they have to write for string quartet with rhythm section and solo voice of their choice, like the saxophone, trumpet, flute, whatever. And we just chose the fellows and the bridges winners. So the week, there's 1 week with the bridges, and they come in, workshop the compositions for a week with the resident string quartet, and the solo voice, which has been Greg Ward, great saxophonist that teaches at IU in Indiana. And he's a Chicago native, so he's there for the week. And I think this week this time we're adding a flautist and a trumpeter because there's 3 different works. So I think they had different voices. So we workshop the compositions for a week with the composers, do some tweaking, and then they do the concert in the last night. And then the next day we start with the fellows. So these 2 weeks, man, are among the best 2 weeks of my year, because just to see all of these creative minds at work and just the level of cooperation, it's just a beautiful experience.
That sounds fantastic. Well, Steve, thank you for your time, man. Great to see you. Great to catch up, and a lot of exciting music for people to check out. I look forward to checking it out myself, man.
Thank you, Bix. It's been a real pleasure, man.
We'll see you soon. Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Van Doren Reeds and Mouthpieces. Be sure and check out the Van Doren Advisory Studio in New York City for all your sound sculpting needs. Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Arlen's Good Beer in Bowling Green, Ohio. Sound by Marco Mendoza. The theme music is No FOMO, Mofo by yours truly. Produced by David Bixler. Be sure and subscribe to Liner Notes wherever you find your podcasts. If you like what you hear, I ask that you consider supporting Liner Notes financially. You can do this by going to the Liner Notes tab at davidbixler.com. Thank you for your consideration.